So, as so often happens when you get a bunch of old-school gamers talking together about their favorite games, our initial opinion poll on the best RPGs of the 1980s was inspired by a disagreement here at XP4THQ. But before too much blood was spilled, we decided to settle it like adults. Boring. And put together an opinion poll so that you, our knowledgeable, handsome, witty viewers, can settle the question of which RPGs made in the 1980s were the best. Of course, now that the results are in, some people here are a bit sore, literally, and can't believe that, for example, BattleTech the Crescent Hawk's Inception didn't make it into the top 5, but only managed the top 10. Opinion polls are by their very nature fickle beasts. We here at XP4T lay no claim to having created the ultimate list of 80s RPGs, including every possible game ever made in that period, but nor will we boast of having created a poll that panders to every single fanboy and fangirl out there. We simply wanted to hear what you think, and hear you we did. Around 1,000 of you voted for up to 5 games from the whole list, including the fabulous forumites at RPGWatch.com. The poll ran from December 2014 until just now, so a very big thanks to all of you for making this possible. Finally, it must be said that we did in fact add 3 games retroactively to the list, against our better judgment. As such, 35 of you might argue that Hack would have fared better, nay even won if we had listed it from day one. Despite all this, we learned a lot from running it, our first such poll or survey, and we intend to put that experience to good use in our next one, for the best RPGs of the 1990s. Stay tuned for that one in the coming weeks, but before then, let's look at the 1980s results. But first, here is the final list of contenders for the best RPGs of the 1980s. Ancient Land of Wise, BattleTech, The Crescent Hawk's Inception, Bard's Tale, Tales of the Unknown Volume 1, Curse of the Azure Bonds, Dungeon Master, Pool of Radiance, Hack, Might and Magic 2, Gates to Another World, Star Command, Might and Magic 1, Ultima 3, Wizardry 1, Fantasy 3, The Bard's Tale 3, Magic Candle, Rogue, The Adventure Game, The Bard's Tale 2, Wizardry 5, Ultima 1, Ultima 2, The Revenge of the Enchantress, Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar, Ultima 5, Warriors of Destiny, Ultima 3, Wasteland, Wizardry 4, Wizardry 3, Wizardry 2, The Knight of Diamonds. Without further ado, here are the 5 best RPGs of the 1980s. Curse of the Azure Bonds was developed and published by Strategic Simulations Incorporated and released in 1989. It's the second installment of Forgotten Realms Dungeons & Dragons Gold Box adventure series, which include Pool of Radiance, which was released in 1988, followed by The Secret of the Silver Blades in 1990, and Pools of Darkness in 1991. One major feature of the game was that characters from Pool of Radiance or Hillsfar could be transferred to Curse of the Azure Bonds, but players could also simply create new ones, and didn't necessarily have to play the first game in the series. The import feature was very revolutionary at the time. 2 new character classes that became available in the game were the Paladin and the Ranger. New characters begin at level 5 or level 4 for multi-class characters. Curse of the Azure Bonds follows along the same style as Pool of Radiance, with the main adventuring action using a first-person perspective. The characters use the top left window for movement, with the status panel on the right and the commands along the bottom, similarly to Pool of Radiance. Through these commands, players can select a wide range of actions and tasks, including spellcasting, swapping weapons, or resting, and memorizing spells. The players make up an icon for each character. A character's icon can be physically changed to suit personal taste. There is also a novel titled Azure Bonds by Kate Novak and Jeff Grubb, and it is the first book of the Finder's Stone trilogy. The game is partially a sequel to the novel. Tony Dillon reviewed the game for CU Amiga 64, giving it an overall score of 89%. He commented, "The graphics are more or less the same as Pool of Radiance, which is no bad thing. And thankfully the game is still as entertaining and involving as the original." He noted that the game's first-person perspective is similar to that of The Bard's Tale, and also features an overhead view similar to that of Gauntlet. He concluded the review by stating, "I've said it before, but this is brilliant." Bard's Tale, Tales of the Unknown Volume 1, better known by its subtitle, The Bard's Tale, was programmed by Michael Cranford and created by Interplay Productions, and distributed by Electronic Arts in 1985. The game was originally released for the Apple II, and was ported to the Commodore 64, Apple IIgs, ZX Spectrum, Amstrad CPC, Commodore Amiga, Atari ST, DOS, Apple Macintosh, and NES platforms. The game is based loosely on traditional Dungeons & Dragons gameplay, and inspired by the Wizardry series. The Bard's Tale was noteworthy for its unprecedented 3D graphics and partly animated character portraits. The Bard's Tale is a straightforward dungeon crawler. The objective is to gain experience and advance character skills through mostly random combat with enemies and monsters. This is done while exploring maze-like dungeons, solving occasional puzzles and riddles, and finding or buying better weapons, armor, and other equipment. When beginning the game, the player can create up to 6 player characters. Choose from among the following classes: Bard, Hunter, Monk, Paladin, Rogue, Warrior, Magician, and Conjurer. A typical well-balanced party might consist of a couple of fighters, a rogue, a bard, and a couple of magic users. The Bard's Tale was very successful, and became the first non-wizardry computer role-playing game to challenge the Ultima series sales. The game was reviewed in 1986 in Dragon, issue number 116, by Hartley and Patty Lesser, in the Role of Computers column. They concluded that Bard's Tale, a game of high adventure, is one we recommend for your software library. A compilation of all 3 of the Bard's Tales games, entitled the Bard's Tales Trilogy, was released for DOS by Electronic Arts in 1990.
3.
Wasteland was developed by Interplay Productions and first published by Electronic Arts for the Commodore 64, Apple II, and PC-DOS in 1988. The game is set in a futuristic post-apocalyptic America that was destroyed by nuclear holocaust generations before. It was re-released for Microsoft Windows, OS X, and Linux in 2013 by In Exile Entertainment. In the year 2087, following the devastation of a global nuclear war in 1988, a remnant force of the United States Army calling themselves the Desert Rangers is based in the southwestern United States. A team of Desert Rangers is assigned to investigate a series of disturbances in the nearby area, and throughout the game explores the remaining enclaves of human civilization, including a post-apocalyptic Las Vegas. Over the course of the game, the player's party discovers evidence of a larger menace that threatens to exterminate what is left of the humankind in the game's region and eventually the world. It is a pre-war AI computer that is operating from a surviving military facility, Base Cochise, where it is constructing armies of killer machines and cybernetically modified humans with which it is attacking settlements. Its goal is to replace the current flawed population with genetically pure specimens. With the help from a pre-war android named Max, the player recovers the necessary technology and weapons in order to confront the computer out of space and stop it by making the base's nuclear reactor melt down. Critically acclaimed and commercially successful, Wasteland was intended to be followed by 2 separate sequels, but Electronic Arts' Fountain of Dreams was turned into an unrelated game and Interplay's own Meantime was cancelled. The game's general setting and concept, however, became the basis for Interplay's 1997 role-playing video game Fallout, which itself would extend into a successful series. A sequel, Wasteland 2, was developed by In Exile Entertainment and published on September 19, 2014.
2.
Ultima 4 Quest of the Avatar was first released in 1985 for the Apple II and is the 4th installment in the Ultima series. It is the first in the Age of Enlightenment trilogy, shifting the series from the hack-and-slash, dungeon crawl gameplay of its Age of Darkness predecessors towards an ethically nuanced, story-driven approach. Unlike most other RPGs, the game is not set in an Age of Darkness. Prosperous Britannia resembles Renaissance Italy or King Arthur's Camelot. The object of the game is to focus on the main character's development and virtuous life, possibly because the land is at peace, and become a spiritual leader and an example to the people of the world of Britannia. The game follows the protagonist's struggle to understand and exercise the 8 virtues. After proving his or her understanding in the 8 virtues, locating several artifacts, and finally descending into the dungeons called the Stygian Abyss to gain access to the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom, the protagonist becomes an avatar. Technically, the game was very similar to Ultima 3 Exodus, although much larger. This was the first Ultima game to feature a real conversation system, whereas NPCs in the earlier parts would only give one canned answer when talked to. Now players can interact with them by specifying a subject of conversation, the subject determined either by a standard set of questions, name, job, health, or by information gleaned from the previous answers, or from other characters. Many subquests were arranged around this. In 1996, Computer Gaming World named Ultima 4 as its number 2 on its best games of all time list on the PC. Designer Richard Garriott considers this game to be amongst his favorites from the Ultima series.
1.
Radiance was developed and published by Strategic Simulations Incorporated in 1988. It was the first adaptation of TSR's Advanced Dungeons & Dragons fantasy role-playing game for home computers, becoming the first episode in a 4-part series of D&D computer adventure games. The other games in the Gold Box series used the game engine pioneered in Pool of Radiance, as did later D&D titles such as the Neverwinter Nights online game. Pool of Radiance takes place in the Forgotten Realms fantasy setting, with the action centered in and around the port city of Flan. Just as in traditional D&D games, the player starts by building a party of up to 6 characters, deciding the race, sex, class, and ability scores for each. The player's party is enlisted to help the settled part of the city by clearing out the marauding inhabitants that have taken over the surroundings. The characters move on from one area to another, battling bands of enemies as they go, and ultimately confronting the powerful leader of the evil forces. During play, the player characters gain experience points, which allow them to increase their capabilities. Duh. The game primarily uses a first-person perspective, with the screen divided into sections to display pertinent textual information. During combat sequences, the display switches to a top-down video game isometric view. Pool of Radiance received positive reviews. GM, the independent fantasy role-playing magazine, called the game's graphics good and praised its role-playing and combat aspects. They felt that rogue players will find Pool of Radiance is an essential purchase, but people who are solely computer game-oriented may hesitate before buying it. It will be their loss. There is also a novel called Pool of Radiance that was written by Jane Cooper Hong and published by TSR in November 1989.